Developed in anticipation of Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Great Britain in 1940, the Me-323 Gigant, or Giant, was truly that, gigantic. 94 feet in length with an almost 200-foot wingspan, the Gigant was able to haul up to a maximum of 130 fully armed soldiers, or 15 tons, and had an operational range of about 700 miles. Ferrying artillery pieces, supplies, and even tanks throughout World War II to where they were needed, roughly 200 were built. Invaluable to the Germans during the war, it's easy to see why transportational aircraft of the modern age has taken after this giant in the sky. The FA-223 Drake, or Dragon, was the first helicopter ever to achieve production status in 1940. Drawing from previous models also manufactured in Germany during the early 1930s, this truly was a leap in aviation history, as it allowed for landing on otherwise before unlandable terrain. Maxing out at roughly 1 ton of cargo capacity, the 223 was still very early in its development at the end of the war. However, in its short operational lifespan, the concept and design were clearly decades ahead of its time. The active infrared device, codenamed Vampire by the Germans in the Second World War, allowed the user of the technology to see at night. Developed for the Wehrmacht in 1944, primarily for use with the STG, the world's first assault rifle, the technology spread to other armaments as well by the end of the conflict. Another innovation developed solely for the Sturmgewehr 44 was the Krumlauf barrel, or curved barrel, which allowed the shooter to place their weapon out from a wall and shoot, using a mirror to target their shots. Advanced and clearly superior technologies, these very same weapon systems are seen used widely in warfare today. The original plan for radio waves was to create a device that could concentrate them into powerful blasts, then directed at incoming aircraft to knock them out of the sky. While not quite achieving that objective, the inventor of what we know today as radar, Arnold F. Wilkins, devised a system that is arguably more deadly. Demonstrating his system in 1935, Wilkins proved his device as a feasible detection system, spotting a plane on the device from a distance of 8 miles away. As the Battle of Britain erupted and German bombers began raining their bombs onto the city, radar was the preeminent means of defense against the Luftwaffe bombers. The Waffe II, or simply V2 rocket, was the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile. Known to Germans as a Retribution Weapon 2, it was developed in response to Allied bombing of Germany. More than 3,000 V2s were launched against Allied targets during the war, many directed at London. Reaching speeds well over 3,500 miles an hour, these rockets were undetectable and were devastatingly effective in striking fear into the British. So fervent were their attempts to repel the rockets, one solution they tried was to fire 30,000 rounds of flak at it, hoping a few rounds would blow it up. This solution was quickly abandoned, as many rockets were more than capable of dispatching of themselves. The V2 was also the first man-made object to cross into the boundary of space, and the first ever picture of space was taken by a V2 launched by Americans in 1946. The more you know. The I-400 class submarines, developed in Japan during World War II, were extremely innovative. Housing 3 specialized aircraft within its 30 meters long airtight chamber sitting atop the 400-foot long submersible sub, the I-400 was developed to stage biological attacks in America. Traveling fully submersed and then surfacing off cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles, these submarines were actually extremely close to staging these planned attacks. Ultimately deciding to attack New York, these subs were instructed to launch their planes off the coast. Each plane was to carry one 500-pound radioactive bomb, and upon exploding upon the city, the radioactive material would infect and slowly kill off hundreds of thousands of civilians. Caught during its journey and brought to the surface with multiple depth charges, the I-400 came under US control and were blown up to bar the Soviets from gaining this extremely advanced technology. The Goliath tracked mine was a remote-controlled German-engineered demolition vehicle, also known as the Beetle tank to the Allies, used between 1942 and 1945. Employed by the Wehrmacht during World War II, it carried 60 or 100 kilograms of high explosives, and was intended to be used for multiple purposes, such as destroying tanks, disrupting dense infantry formations, and demolition of buildings and bridges. Paving the way for modern robotics in warfare, this box of fun proved only mildly successful, as the gas needed to run the vehicle and radio equipment was deemed too costly by 1945. Not enough bang for the buck, it would appear. Known collectively as Hobart's Funnies, there were a litany of specialized tanks employed throughout the war. From bridge-building tanks to minesweeping tanks, some were more successful than others. The Pacific Theater in particular saw fantastic successes with the advent of flame-throwing tanks as a means of clearing out bunkers of Japanese soldiers. Nicknamed appropriately Satan tanks, these tanks vastly improved the range and effectiveness of mankind's greatest discovery to gruesome effects. The Heinkel HE-178 was the world's first aircraft to fly under turbojet power, with its first successful flight on the 27th of August 1939, piloted by Erich Vossitz. Leading the way to another jet aircraft, the Messerschmitt Me-262, Hitler insisted this craft be used as a purely offensive weapon, at a time in the war when Germany most desperately needed defensive armaments. Both the Heinkel HE-178 and the Messerschmitt Me-262 flew at recorded speeds of nearly 600 miles an hour, vastly outpacing any Allied aircraft. The world's first true stealth bomber, the Horden HO-229, never reached full flight. Constructed at the behest of Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring's 3x1000 project, an aircraft was sought that could deliver an 1,000-gram payload, coupled with an operational distance of 1,000 kilometers at over 1,000 kilometers per hour. Nearly complete, this aircraft was abandoned in a warehouse in crumbling Germany, found by a US division who subsequently developed their own stealth wing in its likeness, a short 50 years later. Not surprisingly found at number 1 on the list, nuclear weaponry was the most effective advent of the war simply because it ended it. Sparking another conflict soon after known as the Cold War, the world teetered on the edge of nuclear winter, with the USSR and the United States constantly pointing nukes at each other's balls. Only 2 bombs have been dropped in combat in history, yet more than 1,050 tests have been conducted by the United States alone since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Good thing nukes don't cost much to produce. Thanks for watching.